Suspension bridges come in different shapes and sizes, but they all share some common features, such as towers, suspender ropes, main cables, and deck.
You can see the two main cables draped over the tower tops. The towers are 746 feet high.
These towers are only 12 feet high. The main cables, that's one of them over there, connect to the vertical suspender ropes, which hold up the deck.
The Brooklyn Bridge has 4 main cables and a very distinctive tower.
This is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, built in 1950.
This bridge was built to replace Galloping Gertie, which tore itself apart in 1940.
They just finished building a new bridge next to the first one. Here's what it looked like under construction, and this is the view from the top of the tower, 510 feet above the water.
The St. John's Bridge was finished in 1931. David Steinman, who designed it, grew up in Brooklyn, and you can see where he got the inspiration for the towers.
The main cables are just over 20 inches in diameter. That's barely wide enough to walk on. I'm glad they had handrail cables to hang on to.
This bridge was built by a team at Trillium Charter School. Ariel sits on the deck, which hangs from the 6 suspender ropes, which attach to the 2 main cables.
The angle the main cable makes with the horizontal is critical, and to figure out how strong a pull the anchor will have to resist, we'll use force vectors.
Here's our model of a suspension bridge. These are the 2 main cables. They are made of 1/4-inch rope. They hold up the suspenders, which are made of smaller rope.
Our main cables run through the saddles in the tower, which is made of 2x4 and plywood. Then they run down and attach to the anchorages.
This is our other anchorage, which is made of bricks and steel. We are about to put a live load on our deck.
What's a live load?
It's a temporary load that's not part of the bridge.
Can you give me an example?
Cars, people, snow, or bricks.
The load pulls on our suspenders, which pull them apart, like this.
Or as engineers say, in tension.
The suspenders pull on the main cables,
which are also in tension.
The main cables pull on the anchorage.
We are going to put a 60-pound live load on the bridge. But first, we're going to measure from the floor to the crossbeam.
23 inches.
Okay, let's put the weight on. That's all. With the 60-pound live load, the deck has sagged 1 inch. Now we're going to put on 40 more pounds. And now we will measure again.
21 inches.
With a total live load of 100 pounds, the deck deflected 2 inches.
We switched the main cables from the upper saddles to the lower saddles, which made the angle of the main cable much smaller. It's about 20 degrees.
Now, we're going to put a 100-pound live load on our bridge like we did before.
Start in the middle. All right. Go ahead, keep going. All right. Last break, get ready. 8. Now. Good.
We got up to 60 pounds and then the deck sagged and the anchorage slid inward.
So why did the anchorage slide? We had 100 pounds on the deck before with no problems. All we did was change the angle of the main cables.
The angle makes all the difference. We'll use a steel plate held up by 2 strings to simulate the forces acting on the main cable.
This steel plate weighs 26 pounds. Megan and Nico are each holding half the load, 13 pounds. And the angle the ropes make with the horizontal is about 90 degrees. As they walk away from each other, the angle gets smaller, but it gets harder to hold up the steel plate. Remember, the angle of the main cable changed from around 35 to 20 when we placed the main cables on the lower saddles. The angle got smaller and the tension or pull on the anchors got greater. If we want to prevent the anchorages from sliding and letting the deck sag, we better learn how to find the angle.
Let's say this plywood box full of bricks represents the load on the deck, and instead of the curved main cables, we have straight lines. We've got a 25-pound load here, and we're going to measure the angle. Okay. The base is 34 inches, and the height is 24 inches.
We want to find this angle. So we take the side opposite the angle, 24 inches, and the side next to, or adjacent the angle, 34 inches, and divide them, and get 0.7056. The ratio of these two sides, opposite over adjacent, is called the tangent of the angle. Every angle will have a different ratio of opposite side divided by adjacent side. Let's take another example. The opposite side is 34 inches and the adjacent side is 24 inches. When we divide that, we get 1.416.
And when we look that up in the tangent tables, we get an angle of 55 degrees.
We're going to measure the angle of the main cable, and it looks like it's about 30 degrees. A better way of measuring the triangle is by measuring the base.
That's 42.
And the height.
That's 20 inches.
And we get 0.4761. 0.4761 is between 25 and 26 degrees.
Next, we'll compute the angle when the main cables were switched to the lower saddles. The base was 42 inches again, but now the height was 10 inches.
The tangent 0.2380 is between 13 and 14 degrees. Call it 13.5 degrees.
Okay, so we know how to find the angle. Now what?
If we know the angle, we can compute the tension in the main cable and prevent bridge failure.
Nico and Megan are holding up the 26-pound plate. Now, we will replace Nico's diagonal pull with vertical and horizontal pulls. Since the vertical and the horizontal balance out the diagonal, we can turn these three forces into a triangle. Nico's vertical pull is 13, or half the total weight of the plate.
We want to find out how much Marcus has to pull.
Tangent won't help. That uses opposite and adjacent sides. We need the hypotenuse, so we'll use the sine function. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. It's just another way of manipulating the sides of a triangle.
The sine tables list values for every angle. So the opposite side is 13 pounds, and the hypotenuse is the tension. We look up 30 in the sine tables and find 0.5, or 1/2. And when we cross multiply, we get T equals 26 pounds. So Marcus needs to pull with 26 pounds of muscle to hold up his side of the steel plate.
By the way, we're measuring not with feet or inches, but with pounds of force. Now we can measure how much tension was in the main cables on our model bridge.
The total load was 100 pounds.
This triangle will help us figure out the tension or pull in one side, or half, of the main cable. So we'll only use half of the total load, or 50 pounds. The angle is 25 degrees, and we use the sine function to determine that it took 118 pounds of force on each side to hold up the 100-pound load.
Then we move the main cables lower down, so they rest on the lower saddles.
The angle is 13 degrees, and now it takes 222 pounds of force on each side to hold up the same 100-pound load.
This is our human suspension bridge. The deck, which weighs about 25 pounds, is held up by 6 suspenders. This is one of the suspenders from the St. John's Bridge. Our suspenders are attached to 2 main cables, which run along to the tops of the towers. This tower is made of 2x4s, and our other tower is made of Mitchell and Marcus. The ends of the main cables attached to the anchorages.
The main cable pulled so strongly on this anchor that we needed Nico to add his weight to prevent the piano from sliding.
We're going to measure the angle of the main cables by using tangent. The base measures 96 inches. And the height measures 32 inches.
When we look up point 333 in the tangent tables, we find it's between 18 and 19 degrees. That gives us an angle of 18 degrees. Now when Hillary gets on the deck, it will sag, and the angle will increase to 20.5 degrees. We've got a live load, Hillary, of 115 pounds, and a dead load, the deck, of 25 pounds, for a total load of 140.
So why are the anchorages straining so hard to lift her up?
The total load is 140 pounds, but we're only working with one side of the bridge, so we'll only use half, or 70 pounds. We look up 20.5 degrees in the sine tables and find point 3502. We plug in the numbers and get 199.8 pounds of force. So these 4 kids need to pull with almost 200 pounds of force to hold up the 140-pound load. The other 200 pounds of force holding up the other side of the main cables is the piano, with a little help from Nico. So how do they build a real suspension bridge, like the new Tacoma Narrows Bridge? It took almost a year to build the 2 towers. The team at Open Meadow School spent 2 days assembling these 4x6 beams into towers that were 12 feet tall.
This tower goes on the other side of the gym. It weighs over 300 pounds, so we thought we'd slide it instead of trying to carry it. Now that the towers are done, let's string the main cables. We used 1/2-inch diameter wire rope that's designed to hold up 26,000 pounds. That's a lot more than the 4,000 pounds the bridge can support. Some would call this overbuilding. Engineers call it the safety factor.
This is our main cable, which goes over the towers through the saddles to hold up our deck. Over on this side, it's attached to our turnbuckles, which allow us to adjust the tension of the main cable. And it's attached to these slings.
The slings are attached to the arch columns of the gymnasium that we use as our anchorages.
The east end of the St. John's Bridge is in Cathedral Park. Here's the anchorage.
The tram, which travels 3,300 feet up the hill to the hospital, has a lot in common with a suspension bridge. These 2-inch thick main cables are really the track ropes. The carriage wheels ride on these track ropes, just as the wheels of a locomotive ride on steel tracks. And just like in a suspension bridge, the main cables rest in saddles on top of the tower. Here's a close-up of the track ropes resting on the curved saddles. The ends of these cables are attached to the anchorage. Down in the lower station, the main cables wrap around this 12-foot tall bollard, which is attached to a 1,000,000-pound anchorage. In a suspension bridge, the live load rests on the deck, which hangs from the suspender ropes, which attach to the main cables. In the tram, we have a live load of passengers resting inside the cabin. The cabin is suspended from the arm, which attaches to the track ropes, which are like the main cables. Here the carriage is coming up from the lower station. Top speed of the tram is 22 miles an hour. Now back to the suspension bridge. The main cables on most suspension bridges look like this. One solid piece of steel, right? Actually, they're made up of thousands or tens of thousands of small wires, each no bigger than a pencil. So how do they get all those wires from one end of the bridge to the other? They set up spools of wires at the anchorage and then use a traveler wheel to pull the wires across to the other anchorage. They take a loop of the wire and put it over the wheel. Then they start hauling the traveler wheel from one end of the bridge to the other. The traveler wheel is pulling one loop, which is really two separate wires. When the traveler wheel gets to the other end of the bridge, they take off the wire and loop it on to the anchorage. Here's the traveler wheel they used in the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. This traveler wheel on the Verrazano Bridge in New York is pulling across two loops. That means 4 wires. You can see the 2 wires the guy with the pole is reaching for, and the other 2 wires are on the top of the traveler. Back on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, it took about 6 months to spin all 8,816 wires in each main cable. Next, they use a special compactor to squeeze all these wires into a round cross-section. Now we need to attach the suspenders to the main cable. These cable bands are large steel castings that are bolted onto the main cables. Here's one of the cable bands on the St. John's Bridge. The suspender ropes rest on these cable bands and hang down and attach to the deck.
This is our main cable, which is hooked to the suspenders that go down, then connect to the eye-nut, which is connected to the threaded rod. It then goes through the 4x4 at the bottom of our deck. To adjust this, to adjust the suspenders, get the level right on the deck, all we have to do is screw up these nuts down at the bottom, and that lets us raise and lower the threaded rod.
We use 2x6s for the stringers, 3 under each side of the deck.
I know when we put the deck on, it will grab it and bring the 2x4s up to it or bow it down. This one's just a little on the high side.
This, lower that. We need to redo this. Because if you lower that, this board needs to move.
Yeah, I'm gonna lower this a little bit, then we'll redo this, and because what it is this is on the high side. So
On that side of where it connects, it's up a little bit. If you step on that and I re-screw it, it'll be straight.
sweet, okay.
Now the plywood could be attached to finish our deck. We weighed the 4x4s, the 2x6s, the metal joist hangers, and the 3/4 inch plywood. All this is called the dead load. We found that this 300-pound dead load made the main cables sag by only ½ an inch.
Look up here. Good, okay.
It took us only 10 days to build our bridge. Once the towers were built, the rest of the bridge went up pretty quickly. There's a lot less to a suspension bridge than an arch or truss bridge. That's why it only took us 3 hours to totally dismantle it.
Now back to the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The deck on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge is made up of 46 sections like this, 120 feet long, 78 feet wide, and 900,000 pounds. They built the deck sections in South Korea and brought them over in ships like this. They moored the ship underneath the main cables and then hoisted each section into place. They used this blue gantry crane. It's like a block and tackle on steroids. The gantry crane rests on the main cables. The yellow lifting beams hang down from the gantry cranes. They hook the deck sections onto the yellow beams, and as they reel in the cable in the gantry crane, the deck sections slowly rise up from the ship below. You can see the section about 20 feet below here, and in a few minutes, the gantry crane had lifted it up level with the deck. Here's a view of another deck section about to be lifted off the ship. The main cables are 20.5 inches in diameter and stretch all the way to the other tower, 2,800 feet away. They finished the bridge in July 2007. Now it's your turn to put the model together.
This is how we assemble our model bridge. First, we have to move the anchors backwards till the main cables are level. That looks about right.
Next, we're going to loosen the nuts on all 14 cable clamps. And then we're going to slide the cable clamp so that the suspender and the eye bolt are directly above the crossbeam.
Now we need to make sure that we have enough slack so that the eye bolt can make it into the crossbeam, which is what we have right here. And then we put the eye bolt through the crossbeam, put on a washer, then a nut, and screw it on loosely. Now we take the loose ends of the suspenders and bring them down so that we raise the middle part of the deck so it's higher than the two ends of the deck. And now we tighten up the nuts on the cable clamps.
Once the two in the middle are done, we start working outwards, aligning the cable clamps above the cross beams, putting the eye bolts through and bolting them up. Now we pull on the loose end of the suspender until cable clamps on these are just slightly above the cable clamps on the center row. And tighten. After we're done with these 6, we work our way outwards in pairs with these and those and these and those until all of them have been finished.
When you set up the human suspension bridge, you can change the angle of the main cable. First, place the deck on 2 crates and keep the length of the suspender ropes short. Now spread the towers further apart and you'll get a small angle on the main cable. This will create a lot of tension in the main cables. Measure the height and base of the triangle to get the tangent, and with that you can determine the angle. Then use the sine function to compute the tension in the main cables. You'll need some really strong kids as anchors, or you could tie the ends of the main cables to something very heavy or something very immovable. Big trees are even better than pianos. Alternatively, you could place the deck on the floor and move the towers closer together. That will increase the angle of the main cable. Looks like 40 to 45 degrees. Bigger angle means less tension on the main cables, so it'll be easier on the anchorages. What about the kids who are the towers? Eric and Tim don't seem to be under much stress when the angle is low. The main cable is at a bigger angle here, and it looks like Tim is feeling the stress. If we increase the angle of the main cable, that will decrease the tension in the main cable, making it easier for the anchors to hold up the load. Now, if we make the angle of the main cable smaller, the tension increases, and the pull on the anchorage also increases. Now we need 2 kids on the anchorage to hold up the same 100-pound live load.